Folks, welcome to the show. I'm so happy and excited about some of the big conversations that we got lined up for you today, as we're going to jump into one of the big discussions around reparations. And this is coming out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, where there was a recent order about the Tulsa massacre, survivors and the victims of that massacre, and really what should be done. How should that situation be be made accountable for those who are responsible? Now, this is the big question that has been looming over court cases for the past few years, not just the past 1 or 2, I'm talking about at least 20 years, folks, where the question has been asked, well, what about justice? What does justice look like in the case of the Tulsa massacre? And so today we wanted to have a conversation about this, because it was just announced earlier this week that Judge Caroline Walls said that the motion to dismiss this conversation, or to dismiss this motion where defendants sought a motion to dismiss the case where plaintiffs are seeking reparations, Judge Caroline Wells said that was granted in part and denied in part, which essentially means that the case can proceed and move forward as they are seeking justice for the victims and survivors of the Tulsa massacre. Now, one of the lawyers and the attorneys of the case, Mr. Solomon, let me make sure I'm getting his name correctly, Demario Solomon Simmons. He is a plaintiff. He's an attorney for the plaintiff in the case. And one of the things that he said is that there are only literally a handful of survivors left from the Tulsa massacre. And Keenan, let's put this quote on the screen. One of the things he said was this: when you work on something for 20 plus years, folks, check this out. You have defeat after defeat. You have client after client die. To know I have 3 living survivors that are here with me right now feel this partial victory, it means everything. Now, Mr. Solomon Simmons has been saying that he's been working with these clients, 3 of these clients that he has over the age of 100 years old. They have yet to receive any real justice, nor have they gotten any real evidence that something was going to be done about the Tulsa massacre. And it looks like this week, after all of this time, folks, this week, the judge says the case can move forward as they're fighting for reparations. Now, what does that mean? What does that look like? We are going to be joined in a few moments by Dr. Ray Winbush, but we wanted to bring New Culture crew member Kia Gladden into this conversation first to get her take on it, and then we bring in Dr. Winbush very quickly. But Kia, thank you again for checking in. You are an educator. You are a researcher. What does this mean for you? What do you take from this recent judgment from Judge Carolyn Wells?
So there's a lot of things that I have. One of my biggest things that actually scares me about this is, without even trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but I'm trying to figure out why it is that they've been starting this case for a number of years, but particularly back in 2000, in the year 2000, right? And now we have only 3 survivors left, right? So at this point, what they're attempting to do is, it seems like, sort of waiting them out, because we have, 2 that are 107, 1 that is 108. So that story is about to be not told anymore. And we already know about, when it comes to Tulsa, even in Tulsa, it's been a secret that no one told anyone about. So I'm just trying to figure out why all of a sudden, is it trying to say in history, oh no, we were going to do something about this? Or is it saying, let's make it seem like we were going to do something about this, and, we no longer have any survivors to actually tell that story?
Yeah, and I think that's the race against the clock that the attorney for the plaintiffs have been talking about, which is why dealing with, right? One of the survivors, and I want to make sure I got her name correctly as well. She's about to turn 108 years old, and so her attorney said, hey, can we make a decision quickly, because her birthday is coming up on the May the 10th, and
Right.
we want to make sure that she can be around for this.
Know
Like,
her
this will be a
story.
great birthday
Exactly.
gift for her.
Because it would
So
be
it's going to
really,
be
really
very interesting. I want to bring in Dr. Ray Wimbush, who is
sure.
an author. He is a scholar. He's a researcher and a professor, and he's director of the Urban Institute at Morgan State University. Dr. Wimbush, always a great pleasure to have you as part of these conversations. How are you this afternoon?
Good to see you.
Good, good. Dr. Wimbush, you've been dealing with and working on the issue of reparations for at least 30 years. But one of the things that we're seeing from this Tulsa massacre, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Doc, I have not heard Tulsa being brought into the conversation of reparations. I did not know that was a goal for this unfortunate, tragic part of our history. I did not know that they were asking for reparations. I know that they was asking for justice, but I didn't know specifically they were asking for reparations. How did that happen?
Well, it happened, as you said earlier, the Tulsa reparations case has been going on for at least 20 years. People forget that Johnny Cochran, the late Johnny Cochran, was one of the lawyers for the plaintiffs in the case, as well as Charles Ogletree, who teaches at Harvard. And, Brother Ogletree, we call him Tree. He's now suffering from Alzheimer's. So this is a case that is long overdue. I remember when Sister Viola Fletcher was in her late 80s, and people were saying, we've got to do this quickly. And now, as you say, next week she turns 108. Leslie Randall, she's 107, and Hughes Van Ellis is 101. And so we've always looked at the Tulsa case as being a critical case. I first learned about it, and it's important to note this, that John Hope Franklin was my professor at University of Chicago a long time ago, millions of years ago, when I was working on my degree. And his father, Buck Franklin, was the attorney for the victims of the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre in 1921. They would not let them sue then. And the judge 20 years ago told them, well, we don't think that the effects of the 21 riot are still being felt, which is a lie, of course. So that Judge Wall moved this forward is a major victory.
So there was a part of this, Dr. Wimbush, that I thought that was interesting, which was the not the attorney for the plaintiffs, but I guess the prosecutor. And I want to make sure that we bring up the fact that this prosecutor, John Tucker, he's representing the Tulsa Chamber, and basically he was trying to make the case that what happened 100 years ago, it really, and they call it, they looked at the I guess the charge is public nuisance. So before I get to his case, I want to get your understanding of this and help us to understand.
Well,
they're saying that public nuisance in what regard?
Well, see, we've tried every angle on this, just every angle on this. The idea that Brother DeMario, the lawyer for the plaintiffs now, is saying is that it was a nuisance. And this, you got to understand, the word nuisance is a broad legal term. Yeah, what happened in 1921 damaged the community. It was a nuisance to the community. I mean, that's an understatement.
Right.
It was a massacre, but under the law, it's the last thing that you can actually do in this case. That's why this case was so important. And I think the sister said earlier, and it's very true, and it's not a conspiracy theory. They are trying to wait out till all of the victims of the massacre have died. I remember when testimony before the House back in like 2005 or 2006, there were something like 20 survivors of the massacre. Now we're down to 3.
Yes.
And what's really interesting, I'll say this and I'll shut up, J.T. Tucker, the mayor of Tulsa, he was so, excited about building the park, apologizing and everything. But he is one of the persons opposed to reparations, including including the guy that you just mentioned, the head of the Chamber of Commerce. There's 7 defendants in this case, and both the mayor as well as the head of the Chamber of Commerce are one of them.
So Mr. Tucker said that that the massacre happened too long ago to warrant a charge of public nuisance, and that the courts need to really look at and evaluate how much of the law behind public nuisance would extend to cover a circumstance like this. So how do you think that would play out in the next step of this whole process, Doc?
Well, I think they're going to be able to prove this. We really have confidence in this lawsuit. If you can imagine for a moment, there was a major uprising in Atlanta, Georgia in 1906. In fact, W.B. Du Bois was living there at that time. Now we see Atlanta, what do they call it? The Black Mecca. Film studios there, the Black middle class, solidly Black mayor, so forth. That would have been Tulsa had not the massacre occurred. Instead of us saying we're all going to go to Atlanta to live, we would have all been saying we're going to go to Tulsa to live.
Facts.
And so, the mayor doesn't have a leg to stand on. It's amazing that when it comes to white history, we want to remember it and still see it as important. So most recently, we celebrate the impact of 9/11 right now. We always talk about remember the Alamo. We have Memorial Day, what happens on the 4th of July. But when it comes to Black suffering, we want to say, well, that's over with. Yeah, slavery was bad. What happened in Tulsa was bad, but that's over with. That happened 100 years ago. So when it comes to Black suffering, we want to get through with it quickly.
Yeah, very, very much, very much. And Nakia, when we talking about that level of Black suffering, I mean, it was brought up during this recent court trial that this massacre was likened to an oil spill.
Yes.
That you won't, like, just like any, and I remember when they had the Valdez oil spill years ago, and all of those oil spills, like, you really can't wrap your head or your mind around how much of an impact that had on the environment. And that's the same way that folks presented what happened 100 years ago to the courts, that there are generations with an S that have been affected by this massacre that happened on May 31st through June the 1st. So do you think that's a strong defense?
Absolutely not. I mean, to compare, well, I wouldn't consider it like a natural disaster. Obviously, an oil spill is not necessarily a natural disaster, but in terms of comparing human on human, that's utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
To compare those two, and it's actually offensive. And it's offensive to the descendants of those who did suffer through that. I got to listen to the story earlier today of the 3 survivors, and to hear their story and to see that she said, I think about this every day. You know, they saw bloodshed. And for what reason? So we can go back to the reason of how this whole entire thing happened, because, you know, a young Black man went into an elevator, and it was a white young woman, and she was operating the elevator, and then she screamed, and then all of a sudden it was just bloodshed. So we can go back to the history of that. But the idea to equate those two is utterly ridiculous. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to reparations, and I read a quote earlier today where it says that reparations, if we were to replace the word, because it's much like welfare, because it's really easy to make it seem like, you know, welfare is bad because for some reason, quote unquote, it's associated with Black people, but then also with reparations. but it said reparations is to replace the wealth that racism stole.
Mm.
So reparations is not a bad thing. It just has a bad connotation when you use that word. I don't know how to rephrase it because our government, I'll say that, has allowed it to become a negative connotation, much like they did with welfare.
Well,
And
I
that's
think,
my problem.
and I think part of that, the reason that that becomes such a touchy point, touchy subject, Nakia, is the fact that people don't want this country. Like this country, we have a terrible, terrible history of taking ownership of the stuff that we've done bad to people, on how we made violations. Like reparations to a lot of people is another word for justice. And
Absolutely.
and really, who wants to be held accountable for some violations that they know that they're wrong for? I mean, this is and I saw this, Dr. Winbush, that when we have this conversation about Tulsa, when we have this conversation about the transatlantic slave trade, it comes down to the fact that America does not want to face the reality that it was the source of pain, hurt, generational division, familial division. I mean, America just doesn't want to come forward and say, you know what, we did that. We did this.
You're exactly correct. And it's amazing how the system of white supremacy can weaponize words. So right now we see the word woke. I remember just 7-8 years ago, that was a positive term, but now it's a negative term. Affirmative action. I'm thinking of reparations. These are words that were positive, but the system of white supremacy can make us start thinking negatively about it. That's why people within the struggle, we have used terms like compensatory justice or historical compensatory justice. But the bottom line is to repair the damage done by a system of white supremacy. And what would Tulsa have been had it not had this massacre? It would have been like Atlanta is today.
Yes, absolutely right.
Absolutely.
Taylor, I'm sorry, Janelle first said Farajii oil spills are considered accidents. The Tulsa massacre was a deliberate onslaught of evil.
Absolutely.
Facts.
Right.
I mean,
and here's the thing that's really, really crazy about that whole situation is that they had airplanes and dropping bombs. That doesn't sound like
that's not an accident.
It didn't sound like an accident at all. Period.
It is the biggest terrorist act that was ever committed on American soil. People talk about the bombing of Timothy McVeigh, 20 years ago. This was the single biggest terrorist act ever perpetrated against Americans by Americans in this country.
Wow. And I think people need to hear it just as that, Doc. Taylor said, I hope at the age of the defendants that there are not others in the wings waiting to take control of anything they may get. Concern for seniors is real. How do we, and I think that Taylor, I appreciate you bringing up that comment because, Doc, when you're talking about reparations for the survivors, the victims, the descendants, like now we're talking about getting into the nuts and bolts of how this is going to happen, whether it's coming from a state level or whether it's coming from the federal level. What would be the course of action that the state of Oklahoma or the United States government would have to take if it's decided upon that, yes, they are allowed to get reparations?
Well, I have, and this is not an endorsement, but Demario Solomon Simmons is one of the best litigators on reparations existing right now. He has covered all the bases. His mentor was Johnny Cochran and Charles Ogletree. He knows that there's a potential because I've had people ask me about the reparations. Well, these people may not be around in a couple of years. What's going to happen to the money? Look, Demario got this under control, and just like we know, we have to trust what he's doing right now, and he's making sure that none of that happens. He is on the case.
And that's one of the big things that I think that people are looking at, Doc and Nakia, because people are trying to figure out, okay, if this goes through, then this might set the precedent for other racial incidents that have occurred on American soil by white people, by other people against Black people. This will open up a Pandora's box, Doc.
I will say this: the mayor is saying, like, although he's made it seem like he's stressing that this is something that he cares about, the problem is that he's also saying that, okay, well, it's not fair to charge the descendants of, those that happened before, because this is 100 years ago. How can we charge them tax-wise and all those things? So, and that's been a problem with reparations for a long time. It's like, okay, well, I didn't do it. I wasn't here, but you benefited from it. You killed our wealth in the process. So we have every right to come after the wealth that you were able to benefit from, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And we have to remember that very, very radical left-wing president, Ronald Reagan, gave reparations to Japanese Americans.
Yes.
Even though in 1988, 40-something odd years prior, for an incident. The idea of reparations, America has recognized that it owes something to people it has wronged. Even Abraham Lincoln said, after us being enslaved for 250 years, saying, we've got to give them 40 acres and a mule. So people recognize that historical injustices have to be rectified by current generations. And this is what the reparations lawsuit in Oklahoma is all about.
Absolutely. Doc, I know this conversation is an ongoing discussion, but is there anything that you would recommend that we keep our eyes on as it relates to this case? And I know the last time you were on, you were saying that the state of New York is looking to bring together a commission as well, like we saw in California. What's the update with that as well?
Well, the update with that is that Governor Cuomo is no longer in power, and we're trying, it's again don't let me get started, but let me put it this way: keep an eye on New York. We're still working on it. Roger Wareham, an attorney and a good friend of mine, he is still working to get that under the new governor. Definitely keep your eyes on the California lawsuit, which we lost a couple of weeks ago, in terms of how they voted this whole lineage stuff, which is about 8 of. So I would say, and of course, the Tulsa case as well. Those are the three that I'm looking at right now.
All right. Dr. Ray Winbush, who serves as the director of the Institute for Urban Research at Morgan State University. He's an author. He's a scholar. Doc, we always appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Keep up the good work. You too.
Nice meeting you.
All right. Folks, we got to take a quick pause.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, we've been having a very, very robust conversation as we talk about history and reparations, confronting America's tragic past. We're talking about these things. Of course, this is Black History Month, but more importantly, we're seeing that there is an all-out assault on Black history, of understanding the truth. There's an all-out assault of on the contributions that Black people have made. But there doesn't seem to be too much of an assault on repairing the damage that was done. That's why we're so happy to be joined by our first guest for tonight. He serves as the director for the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute in Los Angeles, and he is also one of the conveners of the virtual community meeting and town hall, Reparations Beyond Equity. Now, this reparations meeting took place back on January the 29th. It also included Black Lives Matter Los Angeles chapter and the National African American Reparations Council. We are so happy to be joined by now Baba Akili from the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. Baba, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. How are you?
Thank you, and I'm glad to be on, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely, Baba. It's an honor and a privilege and a pleasure. And I wanted to bring you on just because, as we're having this conversation about how there are efforts to cancel Black history, as another part of that is that there's a reparations discussion, right? There is a growing reparations discussion. I have been in talks with one of the, I would say, leading scholars on reparations, my good brother, Dr. Ray Winbush. We've had many conversations about reparations, and when I had my radio show, and we're going to have more here on this platform. So I'm telling you up front, Baba, you are always welcome to be on this platform, dear brother. You got a space here. But when we look at this conversation around reparations, oftentimes the narrative is rooted in money. And in my opening remarks, I'm saying we need to get past the money. There is something inherently valuable about talking about repairing the damage that was done to a people. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. And one of the things I do want to do is I want to make clear, I'm on the board of the Institute of the Black World. And the Institute of the Black World is the convener of the National African American Reparations Commission, NARC. It is the experts on reparations and has been working with NCOBRA, which is the oldest organization that it's been around since 1987, working on the issue of reparations. And so what I and others did with the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute, I was invited to, I was invited to a national symposium on reparations in Evanston, Illinois. And because it's the first city that actually is paying reparations to descendants, and in some cases, descendants of Black folks who were discriminated against and displaced in Evanston, Illinois. They get $25,000 to put down on a home, to put down on a down payment for a home, or repair their home, because what they studied was what harm was done to us as Black people between 1911 and 1969, and they decided on housing as a way for reparations. So it is certainly about making repairs, repairing the harm, and also acknowledging the hurt, harm, and damage that was done to Black people. And so one of the things that the NARC has, the National African American Reparations Commission, is a 10-point program that looks at not starting with acknowledgement, apologies, and then moving to 9 other areas that can be invested in. And part of what we did with our reparations town hall was we had small group meetings after the larger plenary with some dignitaries like Julianne Malveaux, Dr. Maulana Karenga, Dr. Ron Daniels, and Robin Rue Simmons, who is the retired alderperson from Evanston, who had the vision and fought for reparations for Black people in Evanston. So we had a very lively discussion, a very informative discussion. Then we broke down into small groups, and we asked people, what do you think reparations should go for? How should it be developed? And then we talked about funding sources. And where do you think it should come from? In Evanston, they decided to create a $10 million program from the sales of cannabis. That's how they're.
Oh, wait a minute, hold on, Bob. And now we getting into something real deep on this one now. We getting into something real deep. You're saying the sale of cannabis, the way they set that up in Evanston, Illinois, the sale of cannabis allowed them to get the process started.
Yep.
Paying reparations from the sale of cannabis.
Yep.
Wow.
And in large part, I mean, they looked for resources. They looked for funding. And that was one of the places that they saw that we have, the whole war on drugs was a war on Black people. It's a war on Black people. And so they felt like it was fitting to take the so-called war on drugs, which was really a war on us, and take the resources from that and apply it to reparations. And they're getting $10 million. Wow. And they're going to be, and that's one of the places in around the country where Black people are actually getting reparations. One of the things I would encourage you to do and ask you to consider in future programs, one, and I'll certainly share this with you, is bring on Dr. Ron Daniels with NARC and Sister Robin Rue Simmons, so that they can talk about in detail about the 10-point plan that NARC has and how it is that Evanston was able to, within 2.5 years, develop, create, and implement reparations in Evanston, Illinois. I think it's a great learning experience. And I was so enthused by it that I came back to LA and we talked with the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute about, starting the year. What did we want to start on? And it was raising up this issue of reparations, educating people about it, because, the issue has come and gone a couple of times over the years. And sometimes over those courses, Black people have been discouraged to even think and talk about reparations. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, that ain't gonna never happen. And so we've kind of accepted that. But then in the past, 6 or 7 years, it's come around again. I think with Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, I think the work of NARC and in COBRA and other groups has pushed it to the forefront again. There's been legislation in Congress since 1989 that was introduced by the late Congressman John Conyers to H.R. 40 to study reparations. This current H.R. 40 not only creates a commission to study the harm, damage, and hurt that was done to Black people because of enslavement, but to talk about implementation.
And Baba, that's what I was going to ask about very quickly. How far are we? Because there was some point I remember, I think it was maybe last year or probably 2019, but sometime before COVID, there was more. It seems like that piece of legislation was getting some traction. You saw more Black Democrats, for example, who were signing on and pushing it and saying, look, we need to have it. Like you said, it established the commission. So I'm wondering, how far politically is this issue going?
Well, certainly in Congress, and like I said, it's been introduced every year since 1989, and in those years, through those years, it couldn't even get out of committee. This year, for the first time, it's gotten out of committee. It's got 195 co-sponsors.
Wow.
And which is more, we've never had more than about 40 co-sponsors, 45 co-sponsors in all those years since 1989. This time we have 194. There was a great hearing that was held by Sheila Jackson Lee, who is now the author of H.R. 40. where she had Ta-Nehisi Coates, Dr. Julian Malveaux, a number of very prominent reparations experts and academics talking about, the need for reparations, the meaning, value, and impact of reparations. And so it caught some steam. And then unfortunately, and I say this unfortunately, then the whole George Floyd issue, came up. And once again, and I say unfortunately, it takes Black death to awaken white folks. You know what I mean? Because we have been struggling, certainly, and Black Lives Matters has been around now going 8 years. We have been, raising our issues in the streets and the rest. But it took the death of a Black person, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. It takes our death to move white people to some level of consciousness about, wait, maybe things ain't right here. Maybe we need to do something here. But that's a heavy price for any people to pay. And what I find I was going to say ironic, but it's almost 100 years since the Red Summer of 1919, where Black folks were just killed indiscriminately, and 100 years since the massacre in Tulsa. So that's a heavy price, a very heavy price for any people to pay to get a society that they help build and contribute to accept our presence here. One of the things I heard you all talking about is the attempted erasure of Black folks just before we started this conversation. And for me, there are 4 conditions that Black folks have to deal with: white supremacy, institutional racism, individual bigotry, and mass denial.
Wait a minute, hold on, Bobby. You're taking us to school right now, dear brother. So
these are my observations, and they're your observations.
Can you give us those 4? I love those. I love it.
Well, think about it. White supremacy first. That is, whites thinking they're superior, and then they create institutions to reinforce that thinking. So we have institutional racism. And then they individually support the institutions. So we have individual bigotry, and then we have mass denial. White folks today, even the Klan is denying that they're racist. They're just upholding their heritage. And so the mass denials allows the individual bigotry to exist. The individual bigotry supports the institutional racism. The institutional racism supports white supremacy. And so they're all linked together, and as we look at racism, the denial and deprivation of a people's history, humanity, and right to freedom based exclusively upon race, you can see what's happening here. In many ways, we have gone through, at least my observation, we have gone through a kind of cold civil war, and you could see it happening when Obama got elected. And you can see the results of it now. And we're kind of shifting into the second Reconstruction, if you will. Think about and look at the historical patterns that we see existing now. Look at the Obama administration. The South rejected Obamacare, even though white people would benefit from it. They rejected it in large part because they didn't want Black people to benefit from it. And you look at how they attacked President Obama, and then you can see the backlash, if you will, today. And this whole effort at erasure that you can't even talk. As a matter of fact, we in Black History Month right now. If you let DeSantis and the governors from most of the Confederate states and some of the more conservative states in the country, we won't have Black History Month next year.
Right.
Because
that's why we brought up the conversation. I want to get us started. I want to get us organized for next year.
Yeah. And we're gonna have to, if we're gonna keep Black History Month. You can almost hear it now. Well, why do they? We've heard it many years before, but why do they have to have a designated month? Can't we just talk about all of American history? And that's also a part of the denial that the denial that there is any racism in this society. Can't we just, be one big society? And when we say that, what you do is you erase us. When you talk about color neutral and all those kind of terms, you erase us. We get left out. We get dismissed. And so part of what reparation does is brings us to first the meaning, value, and impact. The meaning of reparation is to repair, to restore. The value of it is it contributes to making a people whole that has been harmed and hurt. And then the impact is it contributes toward, at some point, at least closing the wealth gap. We talk about it now, but we got to close it. And one way to contribute to it being closed is through reparations.
Baba, I know your time has with us is short, but again, I want to say first and foremost, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. You are always welcome. I want to take you up on that offer, of bringing Dr. Ron Daniels onto this platform, because I want to put it at the forefront of our people's mind, the seriousness of this. And I think, in this time that we're in, with this level of assault from legislation, from the attitudes that people have about Black history and Black life and Black culture, and especially about Black bodies, we can't afford to not constantly be reminded of how serious it is for us to get involved in this struggle, in this work.
I agree.
We have to constantly be awakened. And I love your 4 points, because even us, you saying that that's for white people, but I can think the same way for Black people. White supremacy, we get into a space of institutional racism. We're like, no, we all diverse here. We go through a place of individual bigotry. Oh, I don't like them over there. Those them crazy Black folk, because they talking about we good over here. And then mass denial, where some of us live in better homes, and so we start to believe I'm good. The police don't pull me over because I live in this neighborhood. And we need to be reminded that nothing has changed, unfortunately, in 2022 America. So, Baba, I appreciate and love you. Thank you so much, brother.
And thank you so much. And we need to be having these conversations with each other. They are tension-filled. And as one of the things that Patrice Cullors talks about in her new book, and a quick plug for it, Abolitionist Handbook, is courageous conversations. We need to have courageous conversations with each other about what we think of each other, how we regard each other, how we support each other, how we sometimes don't support each other. One of the things that's happening now, and I'm going to have to run, but is that the Black Lives Matter and the Black liberation movement is under attack. Its leadership is under attack, in large part because they're women, and seriously, and because we have been successful in changing the narrative, in having the discussion. We took a simple statement like Black Lives Matter and has turned it into a movement where people are saying, yes, Black Lives Matter. And because Black Lives Matter, we demand reparations. Yes, Black Lives Matter. We demand an end to police violence. Yes, Black Lives Matter. We demand an end to state-sanctioned violence in all its forms, social, political, and economic. And so we've took a statement like that, Black Lives Matter, and turned it into a movement. And we know, and we should remember that when we fight, we win. And so we're going to have to constantly fight. We're going to have to constantly be on shows like yours and use platforms like these to make sure, one, that our voices are heard, two, that our understanding is shared, and three, that we engage and involve our sisters and brothers in the fight back as we continue to be successful. So I thank you for giving me this time to share, and I look forward to returning and sharing more with you.
Absolutely. Baba Akili, director of the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute. Baba, we appreciate you and I love you. Thank you so much for the work and continuing to keep us posted on the struggle. Thank you, brother.
All right. Thank you.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to the show. More than 3 decades later, after it was first introduced, the great historic bill HR 40 now would create a House bill that would create a commission to study reparations for Black Americans has the vote to pass, as its key champions are saying. Now, we've been talking about this issue of reparations before, but now that we're seeing some more momentum around this conversation, around this idea of repairing the damage that was done to Black people in this country. And so we wanted to bring another voice into this conversation, a voice that has been doing the work of pushing and advocating for reparations. He has served as the convener for the National African American Reparations Commission. And we are so happy to have him join us on the line today, Dr. Ron Daniels. Good evening, Doc. How are you, sir? Thank you. Oh, Dr. Daniels, I think you're on mute, dear brother. That's all right. We're going to set you up. We're going to get Dr. Daniels all set up here, folks. And of course, as we have this conversation, we want you to post your comments by posting to our YouTube page and also on our Facebook page. And of course, in a few moments, we'll be bringing in our culture crew members, Shaquaya McKenzie, Bakari Jones. Folks, I want to let you know that this has been a long time coming with HR 40. This is a bill that was initiated by the late, great Senator, House Representative John Conyers. And this bill actually came out after President Reagan had made the strides to provide reparations for Japanese Americans. And so Representative John Conyers said, well, if you're going to make an effort to repair the damage with that community, you most certainly need to make an effort to repair the damage to the Black community. 30 years. Bakari, I mean, we're kind of moving forward here. The push is still happening. But what's your take of this? After 30 years, we're starting to see some momentum with this bill still up for discussion.
I think it just goes to show, that a lot of the change that we want to see is really about having long-term strategy. In this instance, I think that it seems that, it's been 30 years. And I think that one of the things Senator Jackson said is essentially that, she needed to go one by one. The folks that were organizing around this issue had to go one by one to really start to change the minds and perspectives of folks on this topic. So it seems that I think the tides are turning. I think that we have too much data now, too many instances where other groups have received reparations for us to not, be a part of that conversation in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that Shaquaya, when we look at this, and you know, I'm committed to using this platform to continue to push the conversation further along about reparations, because I feel like we're still in this space of thinking of reparations as just a free check, when there is so much more that this, not just this bill, but this idea of repairing the damage to Black people. There's so much more that you know that entails besides just getting some money from the government.
Absolutely. I think it's long been refused an opportunity to prevail in a conversation meaningful to the point of the development of a commission, because according to survey, I'm not going to say this in a generalized manner. I'll try to use research to back what I'm saying, but according to surveys that have been conducted over the years, you know, over two thirds of African Americans or individuals of African descent believe that Black people deserve reparations. Maybe almost 18% of white people believe this. I think that the undertaking, as you just mentioned, is not the idea of a financial payback, if you will, but it's the idea of altering, changing, resetting the structures of our economic, social, political, public, you know, housing, everything that is our society and the systems that support how individuals are able to, you know, gain upward mobility. We've been crippled every step of the way, and therefore every part of the system needs reform. And I want, and hoping that there is movement, and I just want to say ashe to our ancestor John Conyers and thanking him for taking this charge in light of Ronald Reagan approving reparations for Japanese Americans who endured internment camps. I think that, you know, if we look at that, if we look at the reparations passed to 9/11 families, if we look at reparations passed even to victims of the Holocaust, right? Mm-hmm. Reparations in our country where it did not take place. The undertaking has to happen on an educational lens. And so there's going to be a dual, I'm saying both dual, D-U-A-L, and a dual, D-U-E-L, in a sense that there is an affront on the educational system right now in different local and state policies to eradicate the truth, this fight against critical race theory, right? But the history of what has happened, the ignorance to the history, I think, is the impetus of why only 18% of white Americans believe that reparations are deserved. They don't understand what has happened through the centuries process of slavery, Jim Crow, and past Jim Crow, post Jim Crow era, how every aspect of American society has been structured and set to work inadvertently for African Americans. And so I think that, you know, to your original question, what needs to happen is a huge education campaign. But I'm grateful that there are and have been advocates such as William Darity, such as if you don't know who Professor William Darity is at Duke University, look him up, such as author and prolific writer Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? There have been champions who have been really leading the call in the past decade, more specifically, in just looking at the last 30 years, but in the past decade, to keep this fresh on the minds of Americans in that it is necessary, and that is rightfully deserved.
Absolutely. I want to bring Dr. Ron Daniels in. Dr. Daniels, thank you so much for your time, brother. I know we had a little technical difficulties there, brother.
Yeah, y'all straight. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can. Thank you.
Y'all string a Neanderthal out. I had to search back through and connect the right camera. I finally figured it out because I've been doing this a while. But y'all young brothers, y'all brothers and sisters, y'all have to take it easy on the brother up in here. But anyway, we're in, and let me just say it's an honor to be with you, and you just do such wonderful, wonderful, wonderful work on Black Star Network. I see the advertisements all the time. I'm just so impressed with the brilliance and the commitment And yes, HR 40 is on the move. One of the things that I wanted to quickly say is that HR 40 is no longer a study bill. It is more than a study bill. You're right. Congressman John Conyers is the legislative champion of same. But the initial HR 40 was a study bill. It was a study bill. And it was a study bill because we used it as an organizing tool. And of course, that was a result of some serious work by Black nationalists and Pan-Africanists, people like Mario Bedelli, Chokwe Lumumba, and many, many others. But they made a tactical decision after the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 passed and the Japanese were able to get their reparations to say, even though we know we already have the evidence, we can study it ourselves. If people have questions about it, even in the African-American community, and certainly in the broader society, we will acquiesce to the idea of having a study bill as sort of the lowest common denominator. Can't we just study this? And of course, that was what it was used for, as an organizing tool. Congressman Conyers, of course, very adroitly and brilliantly used HR 40 to signify the 40 acres and a mule as a way of putting it out. He introduced it every year religiously. And what we were able to do is to go out to some of the legacy organizations, NAACP, Urban League, faith leaders, and say, can't we as Black people just study this? Because quite frankly, one of the great efforts has been to persuade ourselves. Because number one of the injuries and damages is to our own psyche, to our own sense of self, that we would not maybe believe it's possible. But on the other hand, people were saying, I believe in reparations, but are we going to get this in America? They ain't never going to do that. Plus, I got issues to deal with right now. Why are we dealing with this? So we had to get over that hump. And we did through organizing. But by the time we got to about 2015, particularly with the leadership of NCOBRA, our legacy organization, acting within the context of the National African American Reparations Commission, we went to Congressman John Conyers and said, studying, there's enough studies. We want to change this from a study bill to a remedy bill. So if you read the bill now, it says, yes, study. It is a bill that will establish a commission to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans. So now it ain't about if. We're going to be talking about what does it really look like. And let me just say this. This is the important piece of it all. And you cited some of the people who've been involved in it, some more than others. But certainly this is a cross-generational struggle that has produced this point in history. But the Conyers bill in its original version, not because we could not get more sponsors, but because that was not a priority, never got more than 50 votes. Today we stand on the brink. We have now, with those who are willing to be co-sponsors, 196 and 20 people, congressional people, who say, well, I'm not going to be a co-sponsor for various other reasons, but when it comes to the floor for a vote, I will vote for it. That is 216 votes out of the 218 required. I'm a devotee of Queen Mother Moore. Many people in this audience will be familiar with who Queen Mother Moore was. She was my mentor. She's the one who took my brain. She said she was a brain surgeon. She wanted to operate on constipated minds. Mine was one of them. And thank God she did, because she liberated. I didn't even know what reparations were. But she is smiling, along with many others across generations, all the way back to Cali House and beyond, because we are on the brink of getting this done. Now, the challenge is floor vote. Even if we get the floor vote, we know that it's not going to make it through the Senate. So in reality, what we're looking at is a massive effort, which we believe will be successful, to have this enacted by executive order, which means that the commission will be functioning. But that does not mean it's over. That will be a huge victory. It means the organizing must then continue in order to make sure that that commission is true to developing the kinds of proposals that will really genuinely affect repair. But it's not just there. This reparations movement is exploding all over the country, indeed exploding all over the world. Evanston, Illinois, Robin Ruth Simmons, courageous African-American sister, visionary, courageous, building on the legacy of the work of Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste, who had been at the Durban conference. You know, she said, look, there's only one way to deal with the wealth gap, but the housing crisis we got in Evanston, we have to have reparations. And so she was able to push forward to get $10 million over 10 years. But she also wanted to say, well, let me get some help on how to do this. And so she approached the National African American Reparations Commission, and we worked with her to help make Evanston a model that can be replicated all across this country. We certified it as a model for reparations initiatives all over the country. And you will see it's exploding. San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, Detroit, Asheville, Providence, all across the country, municipalities are springing up, pushing for reparations in a way that we had never believed. In California, they already have a reparations commission modeled after HR 40, which is actually up and running and deliberating and debating and discussing. New York is likely to be next. New Jersey is coming after that. So my brothers and sisters and friends and your listening audience, this is an incredible moment in the history of these United States of America. It is not over. It is a point towards really a racial reckoning to finally deal with the repair, not only for enslavement, but for all of the racially exclusionary policies that are the legacy of enslavement, as documented by Dr. Claude Anderson, Black Labor, White Wealth. He lays it out right up to the current period.
Dr. Daniels, I'm wondering, I got two questions. The first question is that this is an election year. Now, during the 2020 Democratic primary election, the Washington Post asked candidates if they thought the federal government should pay reparations to the descendants of enslaved people. Nearly all of the leading contenders at that time, including President Biden, said that they supported an in-depth study of the issue. And this is a big change from what we saw from President Barack Obama when he said that he did not, when he rejected the idea back in 2008. And the reason he did, he said that he understands that it's justified, but the politics of white resistance and resentment made the issue a non-starter during his presidency. What's the likelihood that this can be a part of the electoral conversation for this year, especially when we're bringing in new senators and new congresspeople?
Well, it will be a part of the electoral equation because it will be done. So what's going to happen is, as Dr. John Henry Clark said, white nationalism is the enemy of black nationalism. So white nationalism, we're in one of the most dangerous periods in the history of these United States of America, when you can have a white nationalist be a policy advisor in the White House, which is what and still one more is still there, Stephen Miller. Of course, Bannon was right up in the White House, and you saw what happened on January 6th, and this whole MAGA mad crowd. I mean, we're in the dying throes of this version of a racialized capitalist system, and they are, so it is dangerous. So there are going to be attacks, but this will not stop it from happening. It will be enacted, and it will be enacted precisely because Black people in this country are the most reliable voters within the Democratic Party. The reason why it exploded upon the stage in the 2016 election is because candidates finally came to a reckoning and an understanding that we need to talk about reparations. And we had to tell them, stop, don't tell us what forms it should be, because then they're going to trip over themselves. You know how that happens. We said, no, just support HR 40. And almost all of them agreed to support HR 40. So I'm not worried about it as being an electoral issue. It will be an electoral issue in the sense that, in fact, it's going to be an electoral issue if it doesn't happen. The fact that it does happen will strengthen the hands of the Democratic Party moving forward as they face these vicious white nationalists, who are coming. If they coming from critical race theory, they coming for everything that we stand for in terms of obliterating Black people in this country.
Absolutely. Bakari, what's your question for Dr. Ron Daniels? Bakari, can you hear us?
Sorry about that. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Dr. Daniels, first, I just want to say thank you for the way that you just laid that out for us brilliantly. Yeah, I think I'm just curious in general about more of the work that was done in terms of changing the minds of our folks as it relates to attitudes around reparations.
Well, I think there are several things. First of all, you have to stay at it. You have to be relentless in it, and you have to be smart. That's why HR 40 was a wise organizing tool. But there were various things that just began to have people believe. As Reverend Jesse Jackson, one of the great leaders of that era, he talks about keep hope alive. People believe that. What is that, keep hope alive? Well, a hopeless people do not fight for reform or revolution. It's always on the basis of hope. So that little trite phrase that sounds trite is based on scientific evidence that when you keep hope alive, people will do almost anything. And so we had to persuade our people. That's why HR 40 was a good organizing tool. But then there were other things that happened. We had a ancestor who just, has just joined the realm, State Senator Bill Owens. Many people don't know about him. He was a state senator in Massachusetts. He was the first state senator to come forth and say, Massachusetts, you owe us. Well, when that happened, boom, the news came out. Massachusetts didn't win it necessarily, but it put it in the air. You had Deidre Pellman Farmer, who came out and working with a number of lawyers and so forth, who challenged corporations. You owe us. Well, eventually it was ruled that, well, you don't have standing given the nature of your American jurisprudence, but that was a big push forward in that regard. And then, of course, you had people like, and this was already referenced in this generation, Ta-Nehisi Coates. Ta-Nehisi Coates was, I didn't know who Ta-Nehisi Coates was. I know who he is now. And you know that the fruit don't fall too far from the tree because I know his father.
Right.
His father is Paul Coates, Black classic.
Yes,
but I didn't know that. But this brother did not even believe in reparations. But he did the study, and he did the study in Chicago. And by the way, his other contribution he made was to have people to understand that it's not just about enslavement. Even though we're talking about the greatest Holocaust in human history in terms of the number of people who lost their lives, it is about all of those other racial exclusionary policies. He studied redlining in the city of Chicago, and he said, wow, look at what, with the complicity and overt actions of the city, happened to Black people. And so when he did that, he became a convert. And all of a sudden, I'm walking around and everybody was talking about Ta-Nehisi Coates and what he was saying. Then you have tomorrow is going to be the anniversary, unfortunately, of the martyrdom of Trayvon Martin. He did not die in vain. Why? Because born out of his death came Black Lives Matter, right?
Yep.
And Black Lives Matter, which then the broader umbrella movement for Black Lives, they became engaged. A new generation saying, we know y'all been involved, but we got some we with you, but we got some even deeper ideas about invest, divest. And so that was a major contribution. And then, of course, it seems to me that one of the things we have to look at is that a lot of people are not aware of is on the international front, CARICOM, the Caribbean nations, because this is a global Pan-Africanist struggle. And so the nations of CARICOM in 2014 came together, all of them. Some of them are moderate, some of them are more conservative, some of them are radical. They said, look, we are demanding of the former colonial powers, even though they are still dependent. They said, y'all created this mess. We got people who are sick from diabetes. We got people who are homeless. We have people in poverty. We are demanding reparations for Native genocide and African enslavement. Boom. Well, what did that do? All of a sudden, we said, wow, if they can do it and heads of state are demanding it, we seized upon that as an organizing tool, and we brought that right up inside the United States of America and created the National African American Reparations Commission and included in COBRA and a number of other leading activists to put forth a 10-point program as a framework for reparations to begin to push forward in that regard. And then I have to say, the public lynching. And again, I keep listening to his daughter, Daddy, you changed the whole world. That his daughter said, Daddy, you changed the whole world. The public lynching of George Floyd, he did not die in vain. We wish he had not died. We wish he had not. But it changed the world because it was like in a way next week is going to be Bloody Sunday.
Right.
It's like Bloody Sunday in this era. I mean, people saw that live on television. And it just shook the entirety of not only this country and the world. So all of a sudden, you had white folks coming on board who in, Idaho, Wisconsin, in Idaho and Montana and all, Wyoming and rural areas, and Black Lives Matter signs all over the suburbs. So that was a moment of national inflection that began to also have people examine the nature of white supremacy in this society, and to have a president who publicly says the words out of his mouth, systemic racism, and of course he's getting attacked for it, but he's saying it, right? And he's responding in that regard. And this first executive order was on equity, saying we got to stop this now himself for equity policy. So all of these things, it seems to me, have contributed in a major, major, major way to the moment that we're in at this point in history. And finally, to have a concrete example like Evanston, do not underestimate that. When Evanston actually voted and then actually moved through a process of awarding it, then some people said, oh, it's too small. Well, yeah, it's too small. Nobody's saying the fact that it's small does not mean it's not reparations. It is reparations. That's why the federal legislation is so important, because that's where the trillions of dollars that will be there that are needed to go through places like Evanston to build out those programs. But people all over the world responded. Why? Because it said, keep hope alive, because it is alive. It is concrete. It can be done, and it is being done. So we are in one of the greatest moments in the history of African people on these hostile shores. And in our hands, it's ironic that it's in our hands, this democracy that was flawed from the very beginning, that was always intended to be a white man's, and I emphasize man's land, because it was not intended for women or at all. It is in our hands, ironically, to be those who are really going to radically change the nature of what these United States of America are.
Absolutely. Dr. Ron Daniels, who serves as the convener for the National African American Reparations Commission. Folks, if you want to get more information, and again, I'm going to continue to use my platform, this platform, to continue to bring you up to date on everything that's happening in this movement this year. But if you want to get more information, check out reparations.com.org. And that is the official website for the National African American Reparations Commission. Dr. Daniels, we really appreciate you and all of those who are working with you on this very, very important issue. And again, we're going to bring you back and others folks back, because I know without a shadow of doubt, we need to keep the conversation going. So Dr. Daniels, thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, as the conversation around reparations continue to heat up with legislation that's currently being debated and being considered in Congress in the bill of HR 40, states across the country are now being inundated with by citizens that states should move forward on some level of reparations for citizens. Now, in the state of California, Governor Gavin Newsom decided to move forward on creating a special task force back in 2020 to decide who and how reparations could be given to the residents of California. Just a couple of days ago, they had a big conversation, a big meeting about this whole issue, and it found out that this task force were split, that there was still a big question about whether it should be descendants of Black people who were born in America, or should it be all Black people. Here to give us some insight about this conversation, as he was a part of the discussion virtually, is Dr. Ray Winbush, who is an author of the book Make America Pay, and he has been working on the reparation issue for over 30 years. My goodness. And also he serves as a research scholar at Morgan State University as well. Dr. Winbush, always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. How are you?
Good seeing you, Farajii.
Dr. Winbush, you actually were a part of this conversation in California. You actually provided some level of testimony for the California task force. The task force voted 5-4, which is a very slim margin, about how they're going to move forward on making or determining the eligibility of reparations. Give it to us. Break it down, Doc. Like, now the conversation, is it about getting reparations, or is it just about who qualifies for reparations?
Well, sometimes where there is no problem, certain groups within our community create problems. Up until about 4 or 5 years ago, everybody was clear that race first, as Marcus Garvey said and others, and that it was a Pan-African movement about reparations, that people saw skin, lineage, Pan-Africanism as foundational to the reparations struggle. The reparations struggle has always been a Pan-African project. We were excited when California appointed a statewide commission. It's the first one in the United States to deal with the issue of reparations. Unfortunately, we have these, how can I put it nicely? We have these blackface groups who are backed by white money. And I'm going to call names. I've been hesitant, but I've got to call the names. Yvette Carnell, who started this group along with Antonio Moore, called ADOS. It stood for American Descendants of Slaves. The name itself is something I don't like. And about 4 or 5 years ago, they started saying that the only people that deserve reparations in the United States are those who can trace their, and the key word is lineage, to enslavement of the 19th century on back. They are an aggressive group. Members of the commission, the 9-member commission, have been harassed. I know this for a fact because I know I know 2 of the people on the commission well enough to know that their phones were inundated. When we were testifying last week, in fact, there were probably about 250 people on the call. And of those 250 people in the audience, if you please, it was virtual. At least 80%, 85% of them were members of ADOS and this other group called Foundational Black Americans. ADOS has, I tell people every time, I get students at Morgan who will say, well, I'm a member of ADOS, or I'm a member of FBA, Foundational Black Americans. And I said, do you know the origins of it? And they'll say no. And I point to them an article that was in the Final Call a couple of years ago, in which the Final Call has done the best analysis of the origins of both of these groups. And they're both run by anti-immigration, pro-white supremacist money.
Wait a minute. Hold on, Doc. Hold on. How do you have? How do you have a group that is advocating for reparations? That group is the origins of that group being anti-immigrant and pro-white supremacists. How does that happen?
Well, I think it happens throughout. I mean, I could ask, and I'm not being rhetorical, but I could ask, how can a member of the Supreme Court who is Black be married to a white woman who is anti-Black by the name of Clarence Thomas? I think throughout our history, we find that, you know, there are Black people who will do anything, selling out their own people for money. It's just that simple. I wish it was something deeper, but if you look at the Federation for American Immigration Reform and Progressives, this is the name of the group, Progressives for Immigration Reform, both of these groups heavily back ADOS. They are anti-immigration. They are right-wing supporters of Trump. And again, I'm not the one saying this. They say this themselves. Their symbol is the American flag. There was support for Donald Trump in the last election. And all of this comes from those who call themselves members of ADOS. Keep in mind that ADOS a couple of years ago split, and Tariq Nasheed, who authors that series, whatever it's called, about color or something, has put out several videos about history of America, that he split and said, well, if you are born, if your relative, your mother or father was born after 1970 and you have a child, then you cannot be considered a foundational Black American. So I can consider myself one, you can, but people who are born outside of the United States, who have had children in the United States since 1970, that child cannot be considered foundational Black American. It's a confusing, divisive movement, and it split the California Commission on Reparation in half. The vote, as you said earlier, was 5-4. And people are just, I would estimate of the 2-point-something odd million Black folk that live in California, that we'll be lucky to get 200,000 of them reparations. It's and see, Neely Fuller says that the number one tool of white supremacy is deceit and confusion. And I agree. And a lot of people are confused about this lineage thing. For example, this past weekend, I was in a tiny little town called Rustburg, Virginia, in Rustburg, Virginia, right outside of Lynchburg. And I can trace my family tree back to 1826 by a brother named he was my great-great-grandfather, Fountain Winbush. I'm able to do that. The average brother on the street or sister on the street can't do that. And it's not that we're stupid or dumb, but we don't have access a lot of times to the files, the census, all of these things to trace the lineage back. The backers of ADOS and FBA know that. They want to limit the amount of money that goes to what they call non-American Black folk. And they've been successful in doing this with the creation of ADOS and FBA. I told someone that Farajii, this week, ADOS is very organized, and the reparations movement right now, groups like Cobra and others, are not as organized as they are. Plus, they have the backing of white racist money.
So how did it get to this place, Doc? How did it come? I mean, you've been doing reparations and you've been advocating. Matter of fact, you were one of the, for lack of a better word, you were one of the people that had talked to John Conyers, the late John Conyers, to even get HR 40
on the
develop on
exactly.
the agenda. And
Yes.
this wasn't just like 5 or 10 years ago. This was like years ago, back in the
1989.
So you talked to Mr. Conyers. So how did it get from having a discussion about reparations, Black people having some level of there's some level of accountability coming, financial accountability coming from the United States, to now this infighting where now Black people are saying, well, if you're not of a certain lineage, if this is not, you got to meet these qualifications. I mean, how did it get to that point? What has happened over the past 30 years that has brought us to this place?
Well, I would say what's happened over the past 5 years, and that was the ascension of Donald Trump to the presidency. We saw his anti-immigration rhetoric create all the problems on the southern border. We saw children being thrown in cages. That's the only way to describe it, on the southern border. And that anti-immigrant rhetoric has spilled over into the reparations struggle. So you saw several people supporting, anti-immigration about African people, Haitian people, and so forth. We witnessed, a few months ago, Haitians being whipped while men were on horseback, and that is spilled over into the reparations movement. It's interesting also that there's a denunciation of our, ancestors who are heroes and sheroes. There is a video on YouTube now called F. Dr. Ben. There's been condemnation of, Minister Farrakhan. There's been because all of them support reparation. There's been condemnation of Malcolm X, John Henry Clark, all of these groups. So it's not just anti-immigration rhetoric, but it's anti-Black heroes and sheroes rhetoric that for those who support reparations.
So let me ask this then, Doc. We know that there was some level of reparations given in the city of Evanston,
yes,
Illinois, right? That was right. And I think that came out 2020 that happened.
In 2020.
2020,
right?
The first American city to use taxpayers' money to create a model for giving the Black residents of that city some level of reparation. What is that model, and why can't California possibly duplicate that?
Well, see, we've always said, reparations activists, and scholars, we've always said that reparations are going to take a variety of forms, as they are rolled out. So in Evanston, for example, most of the reparations are, the taxes for the reparations went to those who have been discriminated in housing. In California, it's a much different, scenario. We know a few weeks ago, for example, Bruce Beach, a family called the Bruce family, received $72 million for reparations because a private beach that was reserved for Black people that had been in the family for decades was stolen during the late 40s, 1950s from the Bruce family. So Newsom, the governor, gave them $72 million. That had nothing to do with housing as much as it had to do with land. The mayor of St. Louis right now is putting an option out that you can give reparations voluntarily as part of your taxes. So reparations are going to take a variety of forms. Just like we know in 1954 when Brown v. Board, by the Supreme Court was voted, that you saw open housing, affirmative action, Voting Rights Act roll out 10 years later. Reparations are going to do the same thing. The key thing to understand this is that this so-called split, which there is right now among reparations people, the split is created by white people. And they've done this. I mean, I don't know, after 500 years, we can't recognize when white people are dividing black people. In South Africa, during the apartheid movement, it was the ANC versus the Inkatha Freedom Party of Gatsa Buthelezi. And you had two different groups fighting each other. And that's what's happening right now. And, you know, if you talk to Yvette Carnell and what's his face,
Mr. Moore.
Mr. Moore, Antonio Moore, they will deny it, but the proof is there. And again, I would, you know, refer your listeners to look at the article in the Final Call magazine. I'm going to prepare another, you know, it's not that it isn't up to date because it was only a couple of years ago, but I'm going to prepare another article that called them out. And I did that at the testimony last week.
So we got a few moments left, Doc, and I appreciate your time. But, you know, now that we saw that this vote that this task force did not move forward on creating a criteria for who receives reparation, what happens next?
Well, that's a very good question, Farajii, because there are a lot of people right now. I mean, how can you say we're going to deny reparations before you even see whether or not that person or persons or group was discriminated against? And right now, the white supremacists are gleeful. I mean, they're happy because they know that they can probably exclude 70 to 80% of black people, if not more, California residents from getting reparations. So, you know, right now, I think, you know, this is almost like, you know, the play was intercepted, if you please, with the reparations, those who say it should be race-based, where I am and most of the activists are. I think we're still assessing the damage of this. Is something that I was totally opposed to, as were other people. I'm working very closely with a group in the National Reparations Institute in Atlanta, and they were opposed to it. We testified, but again, the people who are in ADOS, the people who are in Foundational Black America, sometimes it's the squeaky wheel that gets the, you know, the oil. And that's what happened last week. So we're still assessing the damage from it.
So are they, and we got about 30 seconds, but are there any other states, Doc, that are moving forward on creating a task force that's similar to what we see in California?
The next state to look out for is New York, because there's a bill right now that will create a state task force. I would look at New York and I would look at Illinois, but there is one in New York, and I'm in contact with several of the people there.
Dr. Ray Winbush, who is an author, scholar, researcher in the reparation movement. He has the book Make America Pay.
Should America Pay?
Should America Pay? Excuse me. I appreciate that. Should America Pay? Talking about the issue. And Doc, you actually wrote that book how long ago?
Oh my God. I wrote it, I think it's 20 years, 19 or 20 years ago. And also I updated with Belinda's petition. These, and I'm not trying to push my books, but these are very important books to read.
There it is. There it is. Dr. Ray Winbush, I always appreciate your insight on this big conversation. Doc, we'll certainly bring you back to continue the discussion.
And keep up the work you're doing, Farajii.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Woo! dream.